Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really important guide for modern leaders called the Premium Leadership Handbook. Now, this isn't your typical motivational book. Think of it more like a serious, structured reference guide for executives. All right, so let's jump right in. This handbook is really built for executives who are trying to navigate some of the most dynamic, most challenging markets in the world. And it kicks things off with a really big question. In a world that's always changing, always being disrupted, what does it actually mean to be a leader? So, to get to that answer, the handbook first sets the stage. It really lays out the core problem, this unique and honestly incredibly complex reality that leaders in many African institutions are dealing with day in and day out. And this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because unlike leaders in more, let's say, stable economies, these executives are facing a constant barrage of structural challenges. We're talking about policies that can just change overnight, currencies that fluctuate so wildly they can wipe out your profits, huge gaps in infrastructure that mess with your supply chains, you name it. This is so far beyond business as usual. It demands a totally different way of thinking strategically.
Okay, so when you're up against that kind of reality, what do you do? Well, the book's main idea is that you need a fundamental shift in your mindset. It's arguing for a big move, away from that old-school model of leadership and towards something way more resilient. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. The handbook's point is that authority that just comes from your job title, it's fragile. It can break. Real modern leadership is all about influence, and that's something you have to earn through your credibility, your competence, and being transparent. I mean, the book says it best. Without influence, authority collapses under pressure, and that just hits the nail on the head.
So that's the million-dollar question, right? How do you actually build that kind of influence? How do you create an organization that's built to last? Well, the great thing about this handbook is it doesn't just give you theory. It lays out a super practical framework, and it's built on 3 key pillars of disciplined leadership. Okay, so here they are: foundational governance, resilient strategy, and proactive risk management. The handbook basically says these are the non-negotiable building blocks for any leader who's serious about creating real, sustainable value. Let's take a quick look at each one. First up, we've got governance. And the book is super clear on this. This isn't just about ticking boxes for compliance. No way. Strong governance is the actual backbone of your whole organization. It's the internal system that protects you from the inside out, It's what makes you resilient before a crisis even thinks about showing up. Next, let's talk strategy. In these kinds of volatile markets, the book argues your strategy has to be defensive, and it has to be grounded in financial reality. That's why it highlights tools like this scenario planning matrix. A board can use this to really stress test big decisions. What happens if the currency tanks by 30%? What if inflation goes through the roof? It forces you to build a strategy for survival, not just one based on best-case scenarios. And the third pillar is risk management. And again, this is not just about avoiding problems. The book frames it as a proactive, strategic discipline. Enterprise risk management, or ERM, is all about helping leaders see and measure risks before they become a reality. It builds that institutional muscle, and sometimes you can even turn what looks like a threat into a real strategic advantage. Now, I want to be clear, this is not some stuffy academic textbook. The handbook hammers this point home again and again. These disciplined frameworks have to be turned into concrete, everyday actions. Because let's be real, theory without execution is pretty much useless. And to make sure that happens, it's absolutely packed with practical tools, stuff designed to be used in the boardroom like tomorrow. We're talking board-level dashboards, checklist for stress testing your strategy, risk assessment matrices, all kinds of templates that execs can just pick up and use to put these ideas into practice right away. This quote really just says it all, doesn't it? The handbook isn't meant to be just educational. It's implementation-focused. It's not about just learning new concepts. It's about having a guide that actually helps you execute. The whole point is to build stronger, more accountable organizations by taking disciplined action. So, after all the frameworks, all the tools, where does that leave us? Well, the handbook wraps up by focusing on what it calls the final and maybe the most profound responsibility of any leader: building a legacy that actually endures. It actually challenges leaders to commit to something they call an executive leadership oath. Think of it as a serious promise, a promise to build systems that last, to intentionally develop the next generation of leaders, and to always, always protect the organization's reputation like it's a strategic asset. It's really about creating value that keeps growing long after you've left the building.
And so the book leaves us with this final, really powerful question. It's not just a thought provoker, it's a direct challenge. It's a reminder to every single leader out there that your legacy isn't going to be defined by your fancy title or your grand vision. It's defined by the real, tangible actions you take. So it asks, what one reform will you implement?